For more now on this, I want to bring in Adam Mount from Washington. He's a senior fellow for the Center for American Progress. Adam, I want to ask you about the Madison Tillerson op-ed titled, "We're Holding Pyongyang to Account." They say that the Trump administration's focus is on a denuclearized Korean peninsula, not regime change. How realistic is that, though?
Well, North Korea and China, over the course of the last several months, have been clear that they're not willing to capitulate to military or economic pressure and voluntarily denuclearize the regime. I think we have to be aware of what this strategy is costing us. If we can denuclearize North Korea, that's one thing. But if North Korea will never denuclearize, we need to get on with the business of reinvesting in our alliances, containing the North Korean regime for the long run, deterring it. Starting a manufactured crisis might be useful if you think you can coerce North Korea back to the negotiating table, but that's not going to happen if they have unrealistic negotiations preconditions.
Adam, does the U.S. and the international community need to accept the fact that North Korea likely will not surrender its nuclear program and base a new strategy and policy around that idea? I think back to when Pakistan surprised the world when they conducted their first nuclear test. It had always been an intention of the United States to not allow proliferation, but then they set it off, and that just shifted the way that we thought about what was happening in Southeast Asia or in South Asia.
Right, Vlad, we had these same concerns over the Soviet Union, over China, and over other countries. These are brutal regimes that are abusive to their citizens and make destabilizing threats in the international community, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they can't be deterred. H.R. McMaster said over the weekend that North Korea's rhetoric, its bombast, means that it's not deterrable. I think that's a grave mistake to assume that. North Korea has proven over the last several decades that it understands the value of military threats and can de-escalate tensions when it's faced with them.
And yet, so help our viewers understand, clearly having a nuclear-capable North Korea on the peninsula is not something anybody wants, including China, we should point out. On the other hand, is the rhetoric that leader, Kim Jong-un, has been hearing from the President of the United States and others pushing him to develop this program because he fears, whether it's regime change, whether it's an attack, that it might be imminent? And for him, it's the only way that he can deter the United States from doing what he's worried about. It's
about being backed into a corner. The rhetoric that we're hearing, does that back him into a corner?
The real concern is that it does. North Korea is developing nuclear weapons for one simple reason: the survival of the regime. If Kim Jong-un believes his own personal survival and the survival of his state is at risk, that's what would drive him to preempt an American attack, to launch a nuclear strike. That's part of what we're seeing with this threat against Guam. Donald Trump's rhetoric and his inflammatory, incendiary threats are only playing into this perception. So I said before, it's a manufactured crisis. By raising the tension, the administration hopes to get better negotiation terms. But if that's not going to happen, it's just causing unnecessary risk with little reward.
So China now says that it will start enforcing these new UN sanctions on North Korea. Beijing is going to stop importing coal, iron ore, fish, and other goods from Pyongyang. If that is the case, and they actually do it, what sort of impact do you think this will have on Pyongyang's ambitions on its nuclear program?
Well, China has always said comforting things about this in public, but when the rubber hits the road, they have not enforced sanctions. So there's some indication that they are cutting down on coal imports, but from January to June, trade has been up with North Korea 10% over last year. So they're not putting on the level of pressure that would be required to denuclearize the regime. It's not clear to me that there is any amount of pressure that will force North Korea to its knees and back to the negotiating table on the terms that Madison Tillerson outlined yesterday. A complete cessation of threats, missile launches, nuclear tests, and all other weapons tests. That's just unrealistic. If they want talks, it's got to be a direct overture with very clear incentives for the North Korean regime.
Adam Mount, always good to talk to you, my friend. Thank you for your analysis.
Thanks, Vlad.